It's official. Highguard is closing down after only 45 days. And while I think none of us are surprised, the real story of how we got here is actually a lot more tragic than you might think. Welcome back, everyone. We're here to talk about Highguard, and unfortunately, the news is not looking good for them. They're going to be shutting down the game on March 12th, so only have a few more days to play. And while I played this on day one and was not particularly dazzled by it, I am a little sad because there was some stuff there that I thought if we just put a little bit more work into this game, it could be something really cool. So the question is, why are we not getting that time? How did we get here? And how did we get here so quickly? Recently, Wildlight released this statement about their game, citing the reasons for them shutting down being that they don't have enough players and ultimately they aren't making enough money. Now, granted, at its height when it first launched on Steam, this game had 100,000 players at one point. So you might be wondering to yourself, how could we be shutting it down so soon? I mean, 100,000 players, while it's dipped a lot, that's nothing to scoff at. There are a lot of games that dream of those numbers, dream of achieving that height at some point in their life. Well, that's ultimately what happens when you get into bed with Tencent. Oh, what's that? You didn't know that Highguard was funded by Tencent? You didn't know that Wildlight, which is advertised as being an indie studio that developers came together to make games for gamers like us, was funded by Tencent, a giant gaming conglomerate who it feels like owns about 50% of gaming right now, who is the least indie company in the gaming sphere? Yeah. I didn't know that either until recently. None of us did. That's because Tencent and Wildlight did not want us to know the truth about how this studio was funded. Probably because they wanted to hold on to this idea of being an indie studio. And that is something that I think is pretty scummy on both sides. But I understand Wildlight coming from this place of wanting to be indie and not wanting people to know, but needing that funding for their game. And then on the Tencent side, I mean, I think they just wanted to maintain the brand identity for Wildlight so they could make the most money possible. I mean, if you have been in gaming for any amount of time recently, it's hard to ignore that indie is on the rise. AAAs are falling and indie is coming up, baby. So it's a good time to be an indie studio. It's going to give people a little bit of faith in what you're making. And to be fair to Wildlight, initially, when this studio started out, I think they were pretty deserving of our faith. In 2021, this is a studio that came together that was ultimately born out of developers that worked on Apex Legends, simply wanting a little bit more of the pie. Apex Legends did well, it blew people away, and after it became super successful, the people that were working on it were finding that they weren't seeing very much back in return for all the hard work they'd put in. And so they built Wildlight with the idea that, what if we just made an Apex Legends ourselves that we would actually get to keep a percentage of? So this idea of wanting to make a studio so that the people that are making the game actually see the returns from their hard work is a beautiful idea, a beautiful concept. However, it was also Wildlight's attachment to this idea of making the next Apex Legends that would lead to their demise. And that is because they were very hard set on shadow dropping Highguard. Highguard is a game that I think really would have benefited from more community interaction, from letting the community get their hands on it early, play it, do a beta, get some feedback, and workshop the game. Because there are some cool elements here, but it just didn't feel like there was enough cohesion between everything they were building. And when Wildlight was getting feedback, ultimately, they decided to ignore it because they were so focused on this idea of what they wanted to make. When people said, maybe we shouldn't shadow drop it, people that were working on the game, they said, we want to shadow drop it because we want it to be like Apex Legends. When people said, hey, so mics in the game is cool, but what happens when we don't have mics? Because we're getting feedback that without the mics, it's not as fun from both our internal and our external playtesters. Wildlight said, no, we're just going to focus on the mics. It's fine. When it comes to even the mining in this game, they did not take enough of a look at it to realize that while mining was introduced earlier on in the development cycle, taking inspiration from games like Rust, by the time the game had launched, mining ended up feeling kind of obsolete when it came to gameplay. There wasn't really much reason for it to be there. It's almost like they created it and then never went back to adjust anything and didn't apply feedback that they got during development. And don't get me wrong, I feel like it didn't help that they had a trailer at the Game Awards that was in the final spot that ultimately was confusing and didn't communicate what this game was and didn't capture our attention. After all, I also watched the Game Awards, and when this trailer happened, I was not intrigued at all and mainly was like, what even was that? And when the response ended up being primarily negative after the trailer dropped at the Game Awards, do you know what Wildlight's advice was? Can you guess based on how this story has gone so far? Don't go online, just ignore it. Yeah, great advice, Wildlight. Great advice. So ultimately, they ended up getting in their own way here. And don't get me wrong, I also was critical of this game after seeing the trailer. I thought, what the heck was that? But there have been a lot of people online making fun of the game and saying it was 3.2 Concords long. And I also think we need to examine our contribution to Highguard failing, which is that after this trailer dropped, everyone was so quick to decide that it was bad based on a trailer that was poor, that we now know they didn't even pay to have. They only featured the trailer because Jeff Keighley, who hosts the Game Awards, played the game and liked it, and they also had to throw this trailer together really quickly. So they did their best, I think, with what they had, but ultimately it was too late at that point. The internet had got a hold of it, everyone was ready to dunk on it because, let's be real, negativity gets clicks. And there are a lot of people that are just too eager to jump on things and hate them before they have even dropped. And I think we need to take a look at this because we live in a world that is so divided right now where either you love something or you hate it. And personally, I really don't like that. I tend to be a person that I try to look for things to love, even in things I don't like, look for criticisms, even in the things that I love so much, because I think nuance is just a better way to critique stuff. And I think it's better for your brain, honestly. After all, so much of the world is not just black or white. So many things in our world are nuanced and shades of gray. And I feel that we ultimately have a part in this, in the sense that we jumped on the bandwagon of this is going to be terrible, this is going to be another Concord 2. While Wildlight did ultimately end up taking funding from Tencent, when this studio initially started, at least, this is the kind of studio that in theory we should want to see do well. It was developers coming together to make something that they believed in because they wanted to own their own success and they wanted to give a good experience to other gamers. Now, ultimately, the type of game that they ended up making, I think, was too late in terms of when they dropped it for it to ever really do well, because read the room, it's not really a great time for online multiplayer shooter style games. It's an oversaturated market and one that gamers are increasingly getting frustrated with. And while a lot of people that are higher up made the wrong calls here and were blinded by their ambitions and by their hubris, it's still sad to see a studio that at least initially was based on indie principles fold, because there were some really good things here. And if you're wondering to yourselves, well, if they're funded by Tencent, how can they be folding? I mean, they did have a year-long roadmap. They clearly had some faith in this game. And like you said, Amanda, 100,000 peak on Steam and over 2 million players overall up to this point is nothing to scoff at. It is still quite good. Well, it's because they lost their funding. And that's why I say, don't get into bed with someone like Tencent, because all they care about is money. So 2 weeks after this game launched, the studio ended up having to cut back their staff, so they only had 20 developers left. Highguard did end up getting some patches, and I will say to their credit, they at least took feedback from players once the game launched, and we all said 3v3 is not enough for the maps of this size. You're gonna need bigger teams. So they upped it to 5v5. I also thought that there were some promising things about this game. I mean, when I played it, there were things that I liked. I liked the mounts. I thought the combination of a raid-style game with a shooter was interesting, and there were so many various influences from games that I picked up on that I thought were cool. But ultimately, Highguard fell prey to their own pride, and they did not take enough feedback. They did not spend enough time during development applying that feedback and reconciling all the different elements of the game to make sure that it all came together in a nice way so that the gameplay felt cohesive. Instead, they chose to disregard feedback, which is something we can learn from the failure of Highguard. listen to feedback, work with the community to build something great, and for us, don't be so harsh to judge a game before it's even released. Like, at least play the game first. There were so many people that were reviewing this game that developers said, and that I also noticed in looking at reviews on Steam, who did not finish the tutorial. Like, I'm sorry, if you haven't played the game, you can't give it a 1 star. You've played for less than an hour, Janice. We need to make room in our minds for the world to surprise and delight us, for games to surprise and delight us. And I understand it's easy to be jaded in these times. Goodness knows we've been messed with so many times as gamers, and it's only getting worse, and it feels like the world is getting darker and bleaker with every passing day, to be honest with you. But that's why it's more important than ever that we leave a little bit of room for light, we leave a little room for surprise, for delight, so that when something comes out and there is some promise in it, we can see that. Because even though we saw the end of Highguard coming, it's still sad, because there are a lot of people that worked on this game that believed in it, and a lot of real humans who have hearts and minds and who loved what they were building and who had to deal with people harassing them online just because they worked on Highguard. It's important for us to remember that the people that work on these games, even if they're not good, are human beings like us. They're just people doing their job. Even mine's eye. So that's all I really have to say for this. I just wanted to come and give a little rant, give a little update as to what's happening to Highguard. I do want to try to get back in there and maybe play one more time before it closes down on March 12th. So if you don't know, I do stream live over on Twitch at twitch.tv/vampex13 and here on YouTube on the live tab. I could be streaming right now. So you can always check it out if you would like to join me in a live. And if you would like something to refresh your palate, a game that I found to actually be quite delightful, let me lift your spirits with this over here. You need to check this out. So fascinating. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you guys down in the comments. And until next time, friends, stay nerdy. Bye!